this is Shirin Saleh. Today I'm going to discuss part 2 of contract of purchase and sale in BC. Page number 4. In this page, there is nothing that needs to be included. It talks about, explains what are the terms or what are the words or essential words explained in this contract, such as GST, such as the title, or financing. Buyer's financing, it's important for buyers to know that if you remove subjects and then until the date of completion, if you're not able to obtain the financing, then you're at risk. So it's your responsibility to make sure that until the date of completion, you will have the financing. Clearing title is the responsibility of the seller. Seller cannot make any excuse until the completion date and say, oh, sorry, I forgot to clear the title. And the risk is very important to be addressed and to be understood that until 12:01 midnight or early morning of the completion date, the risk of the property is on the seller. Right after that, the risk is on the buyer. Even if the buyer still does not have the keys or possession to the property, but then the risk is on them. For that reason, we highly recommend that the buyers obtain or purchase their insurance policy even before the closing or starts on the day of the closing. And personal information, the buyer and the seller should know that their personal information included in this contract will be shared within the real estate board and the people involved in this transaction. Now, let's move to page number 5. One of the most important things which is addressed on page number 5 is assignment of contract, which is not allowed unless it is done with the written consent of the seller. And then the next important part is agency relationship. Buyers or sellers, if you're using the services of a realtor, you have to mention the name of the realtor in the contract and then you have to initial that section. It is possible that a buyer does not use the services of a realtor. In that case, the listing agent or the seller's agent is obliged to provide the buyer with a form which is called Know Your Risk if you're not represented, and explain the risks imposed to the buyer if the buyer is not represented. Now let's move to page number 6. Page number 6 explains that the acceptance is irrevocable. Please make sure that before you sign the contract, which is a legally binding contract, that you agree with every term and condition. Because once you sign it, you can't back out of the contract unless the buyer does have certain conditions. But then after the conditions are met, after the buyer removes the condition, then the buyer cannot back out of the contract. Likewise, the seller. And as I mentioned, this is a legally binding contract. And then there is a specific date once the buyer sends the offer, specific time and date for the offer to be valid and then for the offer to be considered by the seller. So if that time lapses, then the offer becomes null and void. We call it the offer is dead. And then once an offer dies, you cannot revive it. You have to write another contract. You have to start fresh. The last part talks about the residency of individuals, the buyer or the seller. Now, it is extremely important to mention if the buyer or the seller or both of them are, whether they are resident of Canada or non-resident in terms of income tax. The reason is if any of these parties is not resident, there could be the financial requirements to be paid, especially if it is the seller. If the seller is non-resident, typically there will be 25% withholding tax by CRA, and it has to be declared in the contract of purchase and sale. I hope you found the content of this video informative and useful. If yes, please don't forget, subscribe, like, share, leave your comments and questions in the descriptions. Stay tuned until the next video. Shirin Saleh.